SchnaubenBucks Kaffee-Bier heißt Sie willkommen zum Snortfest. Beginnend bei Das salzige Schwein, Schweinebraterei, und breitete sich auf Dutzende von SchnaubenBucks Salzbierzelten aus. Snortfest sind 3 Wochen Trinken, Essen und gute altmodische Ausschweifungen. Machen Sie mit. SchnaubenBucks. Willkommen bei Salt.
I do the work on my timing a little bit. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to what may very well be the first episode or first installment of what may be a series. We'll see. We will see. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to talk to you guys about 2 particular topics that has to pertains to the King of Hate / King of Gout / King of Karens as of late, to be honest with you. This series will span over two channels, meaning that I'll try to keep up with some of the current stuff, or just what I feel like are future problems and or endeavors that Phil's gonna have to face at one time or another moving forward. Excuse me. Whereas on the Fight Club channel, we'll talk about his lore and with sprinkles of the current nonsense to reaffirm some of my points or some of my stance, whatever. So that's something that you guys can kind of look forward to. The 2 topics that will be up for grabs today, ladies and gentlemen, or will be on the menu, if you will. We'll be talking about Street Fighter 6 and the Detractor FGC. I think they kind of coincide with each other too, but I think they're 2 particular points, or topics I should say, that I'd like to at least see a conversation be started up over. This started over on the Fight Club channel originally, but I said I was going to make a dedicated video to it, so that's what we're going to do right now. And I had some existing backgrounds, if you will, to help kind of flow all this together, so it kind of makes it work, so to speak. Anyway, let's go ahead and go over the 2 points, small synopsis, and then we'll get on to the main course, if you will. As it pertains to Street Fighter 6, as I've said on the Fight Club channel, Phil really can't afford to skip it. Not like he did with Street Fighter 5, where he milked the wheelchair symbols into paying him to play it. He really can't afford to go another 3 or 4 years not heavily being invested into some Street Fighter game. He was fortunate with 30th anniversary, or Street Fighter 30th anniversary, but then that's where the Detractor FGC comes into play, and he don't want no parts of that. And more importantly, there have been so many opportunities that came out of Street Fighter 5 that he missed out on, or that he could have been able to get his name out there because he was a dumbass, that it ended up costing him more so than I think he's come to realize. But I know he sees it. I know for sure that he sees it. And there's plenty of people who have their complaints about Street Fighter 5, but what came out of it and how people benefited, I think maybe not overshadows, but I think it balances the scales to some degree. Like I said, we'll touch on that further as we move forward. And then the Detractor FGC, as I've coined it. the Detractor FGC in a lot of ways mirrors what the FGC was to Darksydephil. His failures, his shortcomings, his excuses, his lies were all put up on public display. And it showed what I've always said, what some people have said, but I think more people are starting to really come to the realization of that Darksydephil really wasn't as good as he said he was. I think people who tried to give him some credit were being generous. Some of them anyway. I think Phil shows sparks of not greatness, but of competence at every once in a while. He was decent enough to make people believe that he was better than what he was, but he really wasn't. When you go back and when you go back and you actually look at his FGC career, yes, he's beaten some notable people. Yes, he has some wins. He has some tournament wins. But when it counted, when it was important, he didn't show, or his skills didn't show, or his excuses weren't good enough, or whatever. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about how that's transitioned into the FGC, which is our current day and age, and how this is something that he's going to have to deal with moving forward. If not, then he might as well just give up Street Fighter altogether. And let's be honest, Phil will play every new fighting game that comes out that he thinks are going to get him views. But Street Fighter is where his piggy heart lies. And if he can't compete in that, his confidence is gone. His confidence kind of already is, but you know what I mean? The last remnants of it, you know what I'm saying? The grease that's still, that grease residue that's still around his toilet, that part hasn't been cleaned up by Cat yet. If he doesn't go ahead and make a very strong push to try to get good at this new Street Fighter game, at the newest Street Fighter that when it eventually comes out, and if he doesn't actually really give it a solid attempt, I should say, he's screwed. He's absolutely screwed. And I know it seems like a real small thing. Oh, Phil plays all the new games, it doesn't really matter. But Street Fighter matters. To him, it matters. It matters to him quite a bit. And I don't think he wants to give it up. I think right now he has this really convenient excuse that, oh, the Street Fighter, or that the PS5 is out. I don't need to play 30th anniversary right now. Oh, I don't have an adapter for my controller. Yada yada yada. I'll just wait. You know, we'll come back to it maybe. It's a convenient excuse. But if you really look back at around that time and what was going on, this Detractor FGC was closing in on him. It had already eclipsed him in a lot of ways, but it was starting to close in on him. It was starting to envelop him, and he needed a way out. And he needed a way out without looking like a complete and total coward, despite the fact that he is a coward. And that's what the situation lies in. In any case, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to go ahead and get into that right now, just to give you guys an idea of what you guys are going to be listening to. This is kind of just like white noise that you can kind of just play in the background, or while you're doing other things of more importance. As this goes on, maybe there'll be some visual cues or something like that. But for the most part, this is just something that you can listen to in the background. I would like you to see this next image though that Chio made, because that's hilarious. But outside of that, it's just me talking. So I'll see you guys in a second. Oh boy.
Yeah.
This is where I cue out, right?
Yo, this
Okay.
how we do. Now suck it out. Suck it out. Keep it simple, suck it out. 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 Keep it easy, y'all. Suck it out. Suck it out. Suck it out. Suck it out.
Sorry about that. Went into some musical technical difficulties, but I think we're squared away now, hopefully. Okay, so you could say, in a lot of ways, that this right here is the first chapter, maybe first 2 chapters, if you will, in this in this amazing book called "Struggle Against the Grease: The Darksydephil Story." And in a lot of ways, that's what detractors are, and to various degrees, of course. But they're historians. They're what keeps his name alive. They are the living, breathing recorders of his triumphs, as few and far between as those are, and his fuck ups, his shortcomings, and the actuality, and the full demonstration of what his true nature is, which is failure. That should be obvious for any of you who have been here. So with that being said, let's talk about Street Fighter V. All right, well, let's talk about his relationship with Street Fighter V, how it costed him quite a bit, and then let's talk about Street Fighter VI and how I feel personally that he can't afford to pass this up. He really can't. First, Street Fighter V. For whatever strange reason, ladies and gentlemen, according to the mythos, he believed that Street Fighter V was going to be the second coming of Super Turbo. Why? I don't know. He wasn't that spectacular at Super Turbo. It's just something that he's played a lot of. It's kind of like on YouTube, for example. Like, he was never really that great at YouTube. I mean, I'm not that great either, so I can say that about him, actually. But he wasn't that great at YouTube. He wasn't a great entertainer. He really wasn't. He never even really tried to edit, and what he did was questionable at best. Certainly low effort. The gameplay was garbage. Just general how it was displayed, how it was advertised, how it was presented, which kind of falls back to how it was displayed, how its execution was. All of those phrases he failed at miserably because he didn't take it seriously. He looked at it as this small little niche that he could eat off, and he didn't see any need to put any work into it, because look at how popular, air quotes, he became by just going out there and farting out this content and people eating it up. It doesn't matter who ate it up as long as people were eating it up. So with that being said, that right there mirrors in a lot of ways what his FGC career was, and more so than you would believe. Even though, in honesty, especially in some of my recent research on his FGC career, he probably put in more time. Well, he put in more time trying to boast his skills. He put in more money and a lot of time trying to build up drama between the East Coast and West Coast, and him against selective players for whatever reason. They ended up beasting him and taking his money anyway. He devoted more time to trying to make himself seem like he was bigger than what he was, or being associated with people that he felt were successful and trying to cling on to them. As he spent more time doing that than he ever did on YouTube. Like, actually trying to advertise himself on YouTube, I should say. Then if you want to talk about the financial aspect, I mean, YouTube kind of mirrors that. What he was trying to do on DSP Street Fighter, a lot of his coverage, if you go back to his tournament roots, he tried to flex a lot of his money out there on nonsense. When he talks about his tournament organizer experience, he really wasn't an organizer. He was a helper in a lot of those cases. One of the major exceptions to that, though, I believe, would be ECC 11, which was held in 2006, where him and a guy named Josh Wigfall ended up taking the reins of ECC that year, and they were holding it at some arcade or whatever, and Phil dumped a bunch of money into a bunch of shit. Let's see, he tried to get 3 PS2s, 2 Xbox 360s. I could ramble off a lot of this stuff. Like a lot of the game components, like perfect 360 joysticks, but like 80 something buttons, stuff like that. Unless you're an FGC head, you really don't appreciate, or you really wouldn't appreciate, I should say, the value, like the amount of money that goes into stuff like that. But that's okay. I mean, at a later time and date, I hope to expand on that, and maybe I can give you some accurate prices, and you'll see what I mean. He was willing to throw a lot of money at that. And that year in particular, ladies and gentlemen, was when he got fired from Best Buy. Actually, here's the actual story. The actual story was he got suspended. Got suspended for 2 days or 3 days while he was under investigation. Then they fired his ass after that. And according to the mythos, it was over $2 and like 70 something cent. That's what his employee discount was on 3 PS2s, which doesn't make any sense at all when you really think about it. Because it's like, yeah, he said it was like 270 or something. I think he said it was like roughly 90 cents, I guess. Yeah, like roughly 90. Yeah, because 90 cents times 3 would be $2.70, give or take. He said that he was only getting like 90 cents, a 90 cent discount per PS2, which doesn't sound right. I know. There's more to that story, but that's something that I'm working on. That's like a special rack of ribs that I'm kind of working on behind closed doors, if you will, doing some digging on that, because that doesn't even sound right as it pertains to an employee discount. But that's what he claimed on the boards that ended up getting him suspended and then later on fired. But he tried to spend a ridiculous amount of money to show that he was somebody, if not as a player, as a tournament organizer, and how devoted he was to this craft by, oh, look at how much money I'm willing to throw at it. Like anything else Phil does, he can't really show any type of passion or emotion to something. So the only thing he can really like lean on or use as his crutch is, oh, well, how long I've been around or how much money I've thrown at it. You could say that a lot for his business on Twitch by, I need a new laptop, I need a new desktop, I need a new, he didn't ask for a new microphone, I'm sorry. Oh, he asked for a new webcam, he asked for a new chair, a new green screen, which is probably never going to happen. He always has to find these small ways, these small and insignificant ways, I should say, of making these large strives and improvements, right? Without actually putting in what matters most. And as it pertains to Twitch, it's how he presents himself, his behavior, you know what I'm saying, how he approaches games, his personality. Because that's what you're trying to get over, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? Yes, having some of the nicer aspects or having the functionality of hardware and software are important. But you've also already proven that you're rather inept when it comes to that. So your personality still needs to be strong enough to get you over. And it's not. You know what I'm saying? That's why he can't bring any new people in unless they're trolling him. And some of the trolling that's going on is kind of wild in its own right, but that's another subject for another day. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that's a little bit of his FGC past for a minute, so let's get into Street Fighter V. Because he thought it was the second coming of Super Turbo for whatever goddamn reason, he looked at it as, okay, this is a fresh start for me. I'm right there with everybody else, the Maximilians, the JMCs, everybody else who's, the Justin Wongs, everybody else who's playing Street Fighter. And though he had no plans of going to tournaments, don't let him lie to you about anything, he would, at least online and on YouTube and on Twitch to some degree, have some type of presence. You know what I'm saying? He's a name that's out there. He's someone that would be considered, I'm being generous when I say this, by the way, he's someone that's from the old guard who is now brought himself to has brought himself a bit more up to date and can now compete with all of the with this younger generation. The problem is, well, one, it was nothing like Super Turbo. That's the first thing. But the second thing is it was too complicated. He can't wrap his head around some of the aspects of Street Fighter V. It's very obvious to tell. That's one of his shortcomings. That's why he didn't like it. And when he does play Street Fighter, he only plays what? Ryu or Ryu, depending on how you want to do that. And he plays Ryu or Ryu as Super Turbo, as basic as possible. He doesn't do anything advanced. He doesn't understand the new grooves. He doesn't understand the new, or the new Visms, if you will. He doesn't understand any of the functionality that comes into it. And the fact that he was able to, I guess, be relatively, I'm going to say it, fuck it. The fact that he was relatively successful with what little he knew, which is actually a throwback to something that Howard said in the John and Howard response. But the fact that he was able to get so far, which wasn't very far, to be honest with you, with what little he had, is probably something to be commended. But even then, you're facing scrubs. When he was starting to get in, when he got into gold rank and he was going up against people that were competent, he was getting beat up. That's one of the reasons why he kind of stopped playing Street Fighter V in the first place. He kept making all these excuses about how these guys don't know how to play Street Fighter right. These guys aren't playing. This isn't even real Street Fighter. So why am I wasting my time doing this? As he's losing match after match after match, which dropped his ass from gold to silver. If he was anywhere of any competent rank, he'd been screwed. Let's use Low Tier God for example. If he was anywhere close to any of Low Tier God's many account rankings, he'd have been fucked. Phil wouldn't have been able to compete with that at all. So with that being said, Street Fighter V was a bust for him on multiple fronts. And that in the fact that he sat there and screwed Project 7, or Project 7 Reboot, I'm sorry. He screwed his fans out of Patreon money for Project 7 Reboot to play Street Fighter V. And that shit didn't pan out either, which led to a whole clusterfuck of people turning against him and all this trolling, and that's what supposedly killed DSP Gaming and yada yada yada. So make of that what you will. As for Street Fighter 6, and if any of you guys who are Darksydephil fanboys are listening, listen close. He cannot afford to pass that game up once it's finally announced and whatever. He needs to play it. And he needs to be diligent with it. If not, then he might as well just go ahead and kiss his whole Street Fighter career goodbye. Not that it means anything, but you know what I'm saying? Anything that he ever had attached to Street Fighter, he's got to finally let that go. Which he should have let that go a long time ago. He's been outclassed multiple times over multiple years. You were good, but you weren't great. End of story. Every time you boasted about whatever, you lost. His money match records, as it pertains to the FGC, proves that. We're talking about someone who doled out thousands upon thousands of dollars to some of what the FGC now classifies some of the best or some of the most well-known players over multiple games. There is video footage of him doling out $700 over a Marvel vs. Capcom 2 match that he didn't have a snowball's chance in hell of winning. He was a raw piece of bacon on the sidewalk. He was never going to be more than that. And doled out $700 and was mad about it because he knew he had no chance of beating that guy. Didn't have a chance in hell. Never was going to be able to do that. He talked a lot of shit, right? And basically Shawn Michaels. He talked a lot of shit, and when it was time to put up or shut up, more often than not, he got beat up. You could give him credit for at least showing up, but he got beasted. He got beasted hard. With that being said, this only coincides back to how good he was when it comes to the FGC. He wasn't very good. He wasn't very good at all. And he was quick to try to escape that when he left from Connecticut over to Seattle. So now that you're in Seattle, now this is supposed to be your fresh start and everything. This is why Street Fighter V was important. That's why getting all these multiple installments of Super Turbo was important, because they were all ways of him trying to reestablish who he was and try to get a little piece of what he felt he should have been back in the FGC days. And it failed. None of it came to fruition. With Street Fighter 6, he has a chance to start from the ground up just like everybody else. He, for whatever it's worth, and excuse me, it's not worth very much, he still has a name. He could still theoretically pull something from Street Fighter 6 and make it work, or whatever the new Street Fighter game is going to be called. Whatever it's going to be called. And he could try to build off of it, but he has to be diligent, as I said earlier. If not, he's going to just fall behind. And I believe, personally, he's going to fail either which way. But he has to try, though. He has to really try. He already has his own shortcomings. And if he doesn't get over that, he's going to be fucked. And here's another example of why he's going to be fucked. The Detractor FGC. You have a bunch of people, or not a bunch of people, you have a group of people that's slowly but surely building. Who, it started off as just some funny stream sniping and whatnot, while the big three, which are Almighty Tevin, Dark Dave Mears, and LSB, and occasionally James the Lesser or Agent Proper of the DIA were restreaming Street Fighter. It all started as just some stream sniping. Then it slowly evolved into dudes really wanting to be kind of competitive about it, but also memeing up a little bit for LSB's drinking game, right? And then dudes really started to want to take this shit seriously. And then that's when people really started handing Phil his ass. You know what I mean? Like, they were really coming for his bacon. They were going for his neck weekly. And Phil, resorted back to an old tactic where if he cannot overcome, if he cannot humiliate or talk down to these people, he runs. And that's what he did. Just like he did with Evil AJ the months prior to when everybody else had their come up. You know what I'm saying? He used to try to shit talk Evil AJ. He tried to say he wasn't that good. He tried to say his connection wasn't that great. Sometimes he would try to he would not try, but he would commend Evil AJ on good matches and so on and so forth. He always had a love-hate relationship with Evil AJ. But then he came to the realization that I can't beat him at all. And I think something even more important is he came to the realization that Evil AJ was just playing with him. Evil AJ was just toying with him. Which is, in my personal opinion, I believe that too. I believe that wholeheartedly that Evil AJ was just toying with him. One of my points to that is it's either a tweet or it's a comment under a video where Evil AJ said that, I think this was after the first couple of times he may have played him, or maybe even after the first time he played Phil. He said, "I was expecting better." That has to hurt if you're Darksydephil and you got this person that you look down upon, right? This person's not on your level. You know what I'm saying? This person's just a speck on the well, let's reword that. He is nothing more than some unseasoned food that's left on the gouty beard after a typical meal that Kat has prepared for Darksydephil. He looked at Evil AJ as he was nobody. He was nothing. But yet, people are sitting here looking at these wins that he racked up on you, and when they're like, well, what do you think about him, Evil AJ? You're like, what's the situation with that? Oh, I was expecting better. That has to hurt. As it should, to be honest with you. Because now it makes all of your previous boasting mean nothing, essentially. And even though it's amongst just a small group of people, more and more people started to latch on to that, and more people started to go after his neck. You know what I'm saying? Look at Wonder Waffles, who came later on down the line. Think of that Ken player who came down the line. Think of that one guy, online only. Like, think of that nonsense. As entertaining as it was. So Phil has been fighting that for a while. He's been fighting this type of adversity, if you will, for a long time, and tried really, really hard to keep up this persona that he was someone to be respected, even though he couldn't deliver. And that's what it really comes down to. He couldn't deliver. His last real glimpse, or his last real moments, if you will, were probably Street Fighter 4, the Street Fighter 4 series, and that was it. Which leads me to another thing, where when he was challenging LTG to that situation for 30th anniversary, if they couldn't agree on another game, because it was supposed to be Super Turbo, Third Strike, and I think someone said something about Alpha, someone said something about Street Fighter 5, Phil didn't want no parts of Street Fighter 5. Why didn't they just agree to do Street Fighter 4? Because they've played each other not before, and LTG handed him his ass with Relento, if I remember correctly. But why didn't they just play Street Fighter 4? That would have been evil and something of equal or even ground for both of them. Whatever. Whatever. But for Phil, he can't escape the Detractor FGC when it comes to Street Fighter 6. Now, is everybody going to pick it up right away? No. But eventually they will. And if Phil is playing it and he's having any type of fun with it, obviously people are going to flock to it. So either the members, or not members, but I wouldn't, because I don't want to group them all up just yet. The people who are currently part of the Detractor FGC, if they don't end up picking up and buying the new game right away, then obviously other people who have been watching them may do it. So now you're just only adding to the roster. And if Phil can't defend himself, he's screwed. He's outright screwed. And we're talking about someone, ladies and gentlemen, who has propped himself up on his Street Fighter career for over 2 decades. Over 2 decades, he's tried to express his importance, how important Street Fighter is to him, and how important he is to Street Fighter. And you really think he's just going to give all that up and walk away? Just something to think about. Now, let's go ahead and move on to Chapter 2, the Detractor FGC. I've kind of already talked about that a little bit, but let's kind of reaffirm exactly how impactful the Detractor FGC has been. Now, despite the fact that that term has only been coined rather recently, it does harken back all the way back to Evil AJ, who even now his star shines brightest amongst it. But there's a bunch of names that you could put in there after Evil AJ. Like I said, Wonder Waffles, the Ken Player, Mr. Online Only, Almighty Tevin's in that. I think Theo, not supposedly, but what's the dude's name? He was a member of SOK. That's why I brought up SOK earlier by accident. Was it Rad? He used to play Phil a little bit in different type of fighting games. He didn't do it with the express purpose of trolling, but he's someone who played a lot of fighting games, and he was around at that time. You know what I'm saying? I think that was before he joined SOK. I think, or right around that time period. I'm not sure, but he was someone in the mix. There's been a lot of people who have that you could theoretically lump into the Detractor FGC, but in recent years, or at least in 2020, you saw one of the biggest leaps. You saw it with Goji or Goji Tanks. You saw it with Chaos Wolf. You saw it with Lady Gambit. You saw it with Ronin. You saw it with a bunch of people. You saw it with a bunch of people who came out of the woodworks and over time did very, very well with someone who has more experience than some of those people. I mean, Phil has as much experience in Street Fighter as some of the people that he's actually playing against, meaning that some of these guys are in their 20s, right? Phil's been playing for over 20 years, and some of these guys were able to handle his ass soundly. Obviously, my first choice will be Goji Tanks. I mean, Jesus Christ, Goji Tanks was stream sniping him for almost a year. Then I was told, because I hadn't seen it yet, I was told he went into a brief retirement, right? You know, he felt like, I've eaten enough bacon, let me go ahead and let everybody else have their time. And then, because as you know, ladies and gentlemen, every time you think you're out, you get sucked back in. He comes out of retirement briefly and destroys Phil. Absolutely destroys him. That's problematic. That is extremely problematic for someone who boasts about the amount of experience, of know-how that he supposedly has. But Phil is nothing more than just a lazy flowchart player, to be honest. Like, there is no imagination, there's no creativity to his playing style. He goes with what he feels that will work because he's seen other people do it. It's very, very flowcharty. Very much so. LTG too. He's very flowcharty as well. That kind of sums Phil up. And outside of his counter picking and all the other nonsense that he pulls. And if you think about it, the reason why Phil was running away from members of the Detractor FGC, because he was looking for scrubs. Because like Wings, he only finds real excitement and entertainment in winning. He can't learn from a loss. Because if he loses, he has to explain why he lost. He can't just accept the loss like a man and move on. He has to give you a reason why he lost. You don't have to give anybody a reason for nothing. Just take the L and move on. Every day Phil Burnell gets up. Every day he draws breath through his snout. He's taken a loss in some way, shape, or form. Remember, because of Mommy Burnell, he has weak lungs. So he's already taking L's on a daily basis just breathing. So who gives a shit if you lose in Street Fighter? But he does. And that shit irks him. And the fact that he was losing the Evil AJ was already pissing him off because of the "this is how you don't play" thing and everything else associated with that. But now you're losing to a bunch of people that you don't even know. The Piggy Gestapo's telling you, oh, that guy is over there in LSB streams a lot, or he's over there in Tevin streams a lot, or sometimes he's on Dark Dave Mirror's streams. You know what I mean? That was what was irking him. But then, even then, he could go ahead and dismiss it. Oh, they're just some Detractor haters. They ain't shit. But then, these guys are really racking up wins on you. And then, because of the genius of Ludwig World Order, you're starting to see these compilations, some amazing compilations, by the way. You're starting to see these compilations come out where that shows these guys beating Phil down or outplaying him. And in a lot of cases, just outthinking him. That has to hurt. And that's only going to grow as time goes on. So yet again, as I had spoken about earlier, putting Street Fighter or putting 30th anniversary on ice with the convenient excuse of, oh, well, the PS5 is out and I'm wanting to cover all the new games is convenient. Pig luck, if you will. But when that new Street Fighter game comes out, what's he going to do then? He needs something to cover, to kind of, not cover up, but make up for all the dead spots. He needs to do something. And he doesn't, and I know Phil has watched, as it pertains to Street Fighter V, he's seen this new generation of players come up who have made quite a bit of names for themselves on YouTube, on Twitch. Capcom Cup was pretty much as a tournament that Capcom holds. That's what, $250,000 or something like that. Phil's seen all those things because he follows people in the FGC. You know what I'm saying? He knows who to follow, I should say. So when those people were given congratulations and so on and so forth, he saw all of that. And even though he wouldn't be able to obtain those things, at least the online cloud is what he's looking for. Because it gets him back into the conversation. You know what I'm saying? Most people now, to be perfectly honest with you, excuse me, as it pertains to the FGC, don't even remember who Darksydephil is really. And if they do, oh, well, he's just that scrub loser from Super Turbo from like almost 20 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's all they really know. That's just for the people who are, Phil is fortunate enough to remember who he is. Most people don't remember him anymore. Or if they do, they only heard him from reputation. And even then, they don't care because there's enough drama going on in their own communities. So he needs a way to get himself back in. And that's where that low tier God situation was coming up, was that situation with low tier God in 2018. I have another one of these coming up. We're going to actually go over that. There was so much to compile that I'm still not done with it. But his situation with low tier God is extremely interesting because most of you are probably looking at it as, oh, he's just going to go ahead and it was supposed to be just a friendly match between the two of them. They both get some money because they're both locals, right? And, you know, they kind of move on. But no, Phil had an overall plan for that. Matter of fact, I'll let some of it out of the bag now. Kenny Omega was actually the goal. That was the goal from the jump, to be honest. Because originally, right before 30th anniversary came out, he had challenged Kenny Omega to a friendly match or whatever, because Kenny was talking about it, and then you had Xavier, and then you had a couple other guys, wrestlers were speaking on it, and Phil was hoping to get a couple of matches in with Kenny Omega, which, back in 2018, you know what I'm saying? Kenny Omega's name was huge, and his association with Capcom and with the FGC was big. So if Phil could have a decent showing against Kenny Omega, then that could work out. And that got squashed. That got squashed in less than like 12 hours. You know what I'm saying? Because initially, when you look at Kenny Omega's response, it looked half-hearted. Like, oh, okay, yada, yada, yada. Now, most of you would take it as, oh, well, maybe he looked at Phil as just another fan of his or whatever. But in actuality, you go back to 2016, Kenny Omega knows who Phil is. There's a meme-ass tweet out there where Kenny Omega, that Kenny Omega made, which coincides with Darksydephil. So he knew who Phil was, for sure. And a lot of people, good Samaritans, if you will, came out and said, hey, Kenny, that might not be a good look to game with that guy. You know what I'm saying? It might not be the best look. And there's a Twitter feed out there on it. You can still find it. And Kenny's like, you know what? I was just trying to be nice about it. I'm not trying to cause a bunch of drama. Let me just exit myself from this situation. So who was the backup plan, ladies and gentlemen, after that? That was Low Tier God. Because Low Tier God was on Twitter, on one of his many accounts at that time, talking about it. And my thought process is, right, if he could go ahead and have a positive showing, air quotes, a positive showing against Low Tier God, I think Phil thought he could get Kenny Omega back in, and they could still make that match, or that situation, or that event. I think that's what he needed, because to be honest with you, Phil kind of needed a little bit of that exposure from Kenny Omega to get back in. And when I mean get back in, I mean to get back into some of the more social circles as it pertains to the FGC. Because there are some old heads out there who still play Super Turbo, who know who Phil is, but they don't ever have to. They don't bring Phil up. And why would you? Phil is infamous. He's a pariah. He's something that even in most FGC circles with the old heads in there, they don't want to talk about that dude. You know what I'm saying? If he's doing well with whatever he's doing, begging, whatever the case may be, internet panhandling, then let him have that. But they don't want to talk about him if they don't have to. This right here inserts Phil back into the situation. This could possibly give Phil a better light, or shine him in a better light, if you will. And it allows him to reconnect with some of those people. And he can do it off the back of Low Tier God and with the support, at least the way I think he was looking at it, of Kenny Omega. Like I said, we'll get into that later because it's a much larger story, but that gives you a brief outline of it. This is what Phil was going for. And so with Street Fighter 6, trust me, if he gets a chance to do it, he will. But the Detractor FGC is a monkey wrench in that. And instead of, because this shows you what kind of dumbass Phil is, instead of Phil using the Detractor FGC to try to polish the turd, which is his FGC skills and experience and abilities, he would rather just dismiss it, which only hinders him. It doesn't hinder anybody else, because everybody else is still moving up. Everybody else is still getting better. Darksydephil is the one that's going stagnant. You know what I'm saying? Like, instead of looking at them as the ops, well, they are the opposition, but it's Street Fighter, it's one-on-one. You're always going to have an opponent. He could be looking at this as a resource. He's willing to lie on the detractors and use them to get sympathy bucks and everything else, but he won't use them, so to speak, to try to polish his own abilities to get himself in a better position. Because at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, Phil's trying to get back into the FGC. He's trying. He's trying real hard. You know what I'm saying? He went to YouTube, not only because it was an easy lick, excuse me. Excuse me for that. Not only because it was an easy lick, right? But also to build himself up as a much bigger personality and to build a larger profile so he could force the FGC to acknowledge him. If he could prove that he's as big as the people that they were putting on pedestals, even if he couldn't do it within the FGC, he'll just jump to YouTube and do it. If some of you guys are kind of getting what I'm saying. So in a lot of ways, ladies and gentlemen, this was always about the FGC. This was always about the respect of the people who he figures or that he believes are his peers. You know what I'm saying? This is what he always wanted. And he's been looking for years to try to get back in, and he won't. And there have been members of the FGC who have sent Phil messages back then over PS3 and Xbox for matches, and Phil wouldn't answer them back. More often than not, because, you know, if Phil wasn't going to record it, they were going to record it, and then that's something else that breaks down his profile on YouTube. You know what I'm saying? Oh, Phil lost to this person right here. Phil lost to that person. And if you got the FGC behind that, that feels like that's going to hurt Phil. But you live on a platform that's all about perception, right? You live in the public eye. You're going to have to take L's. Everybody does. Look at Evil AJ. Evil AJ has lost to Darksydephil before. He didn't get rid of that. They're in all of his videos. He never edited it out. He never tried to mask it or anything. It's there. So why can Evil AJ do that, but Phil can't? Just to give you guys an example. So this is what I feel that these are two big things that Phil's gonna have to contend with moving forward, and they're two things that are intertwined. And if he doesn't adapt to the situation, and if he doesn't overcome it, then whatever the remainder, right, or remnants, if you will, of his FGC boasting is gone. It's absolutely gone. You know what I mean? Because now, if you think about, and this goes back to something I said when I was doing the pseudo Street Fighter streams. If you look at Goji Tanks, right? Goji Tanks has elevated himself up to the stature of an Evil AJ in some respects, and the fact that Phil can't beat him. Phil can't beat him. So Evil AJ is your Gautopian Emperor when it comes to Super Turbo. There's no changing that. Goji Tanks gets third strike. So the only thing that's left is Hyper Fighting and Alpha 3. And there's a bunch of great contenders for Alpha 3. Jesus Christ, there's a bunch of great contenders for Hyper Fighting. And then you have a bunch of lords, right? Or princes or princesses, if you will, whatever, that are contending or that are fighting for the spots for Super Turbo and Third Strike respectfully. But at least when it comes to Super Turbo and Third Strike, Goji Tanks and Evil AJ, in my eyes, have that cemented. And Phil can't do a goddamn thing about it. And in actuality, it's Phil's fault that they're both cemented that way. That shit's incredible. It's sad. It's sad that Phil would let himself be embarrassed like that. But he did it to himself. He did it to himself. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So that is that. Oh man. I hope to expand on these two topics further as we move forward. But this gives you guys a bit of some of my thoughts, some of the trials and tribulations of Darksydephil and whatnot. Like I said, there's a bunch of up-to-date stuff that's going on at current. Supposedly, because I think James Lester made a video on this. Big ups to James. Apparently, Super Blind Man has finally, he hasn't woken up, but he's at least defending himself and defending Last of Us 2 and this obsession that Phil has with Last of Us 2, which is what it is going too far. It's going way too far. And I think Phil thinks he's capitalizing on some type of hate train, but he's not. It's just, you're just coming across like an asshole. No one gives a fuck about Neil Druckmann or whatever or Neil Cuckman or whatever they call him. No one gives a shit. Like, at the end of the day, he knows, Neil knows he screwed up. He screwed up by trying to do his little rally call on Twitter after he got promoted and all that nonsense. Okay, you're just jumping onto a hate train just to have it. But it doesn't mean anything. At the end of the day, it looks like Last of Us 2 is not even going to win Game of the Year. And if it does, who gives a shit? You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, Neil, for everything that Neil is getting now, his, not necessarily a redemption arc, but for all the publicity that he's starting to get, right? Trying to play the hate card or whatever the situation is, he's lost. Like, at the end of the day, Last of Us 2 should probably be the end of that series. It should be it, to be honest. Now, if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. But to go ahead and to have have the hate mob on Twitter over that shit, there's other things to be outraged about. There's other things to be outraged about. You know what I'm saying? And this is coming from someone who fucking reports on Darksydephil. There's other things to be outraged about. But Jesus Christ, Phil took that shit way too far. He took that shit into the stratosphere of stuff that just doesn't mean anything. You know what I'm saying? Like, if he's trying to appeal to the Last of Us 2 hate mob, so be it. But he wasn't even doing that correctly. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. Maybe he should have talked to Mannix or something. But Phil didn't do that right. He didn't handle that well. That's all I'm saying. And it just made him look stupid. And it was about goddamn time that fucking Super Blind Man woke the fuck up and finally decided to say something about it. Like, really say something about it. Now, I think him cucking out to Phil and saying, oh, I'm not trying to turn into a troll or anything. I'm just saying, shut that shit up. At the end of the day, you put a tremendous amount of time into that game, right? So you could help people who have a disability. At the end of the day, Darksydephil is shitting on you, and he's shitting on other people who have a disability so he can get his own narrative over. Either man the fuck up or shut the fuck up. End of story. And you can consider that a quote. Man, someone tell Super Blind man the fuck up or shut the fuck up. Either you're going to stand up for what you say you stand up for, gamers with disabilities, or you're going to shut up, or you're going to be a cuck to Phil, and you're going to shut the fuck up. Period. Because there were plenty of detractors who tried to have your back early on, and you blocked them. You sat there and blocked them on Twitter because what? Because they sat there and made conscious points to you that you knew were right, that you knew they were telling the truth to, and you didn't want to hear it. And now look at what you're doing. You're out there fighting that same fight that those detractors a few months ago were trying to have a conversation with you about. You pretty much ended up picking up right where those guys left off. So then what was the point? If you would have just been a man about it a few months ago and looked at and listened to what those detractors said to you and been like, you know what, you make a point. You know what, you're right. I'll go about this my own way. People would have respected you for that. Instead, you did the Darksydephil thing and you became a coward and you ran. And no one has to respect that. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening in. Consider this the first 2 chapters of Struggle Against the Grease, the Darksydephil story. And yeah, we'll see where this goes after this. Like I said, there's some current events that I'd like to talk a little bit about, but we'll see how that goes. These will probably be few and far between, but we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. But I'm glad I was able to record this here at current. I do want to talk about a bit of a transition that's going to happen. That went about because, as you guys know, Almighty Tevin has been partnered on Twitch. So I guess maybe the next one of these we'll talk about that and how Phil has one of Phil's greatest bitching points. You know what I'm saying? To try to get his point over. Oh, I'm being so ridiculed by Tevin and I'm being persecuted and look at what his fan base is doing. Now he doesn't even have that. That's gone. Now that him and Tevin theoretically are co-workers, you know what I'm saying? So to speak. So you can't even do that anymore because that partner on partner harassment bullshit, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, oink, oink, that's a no-no. So now Phil doesn't even have that on. He can't even use that against Tevin no more. So that sick motherfucker named Tevin, he can't do that no more. That's gone. And actually, now that I think about it, that title goes to LSB. So that should be interesting. So the next one, we'll probably go over that. And we'll talk about that transition a little bit. And I'll give you guys my hot takes on that. And now I guess that'll be the next chapter in Struggle Against the Grease. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening in. I appreciate it. And thank you very much to Chio18 for this. Big ups to the ultimate baby mama, Oprah Winfrey, for coming through on the clutch. And I'll see you guys when I see you. Take care of yourselves, people. Oh, man.